My name is Daniel Harper, and for the longest time, I thought I had it all. A beautiful wife, a thriving career, and a cozy home in the suburbs of Chicago. Emily and I had been married for 10 years, and though we had our ups and downs, I always believed we were unshakable. We met in college, two kids with big dreams. She was studying art history, and I was a business major. We were opposites in many ways. She was free-spirited and creative, while I was pragmatic and driven. But somehow, it worked. We balanced each other out. Our life was comfortable. I worked as a financial consultant, and Emily ran a small art gallery downtown. We didn't have kids, but we had a golden retriever named Max, who was our world. Every evening, I'd come home to the smell of Emily's cooking, or the sound of her laughter as she painted in the sunroom. We had routines, traditions, and inside jokes that only we understood. I thought we were happy. I thought I was happy. But looking back, there were signs. Little things that I brushed off because I trusted her. The late nights at the gallery, the sudden interest in fitness, the way she'd smile at her phone and then quickly lock it when I walked into the room. I told myself I was being paranoid. Emily loved me. She wouldn't betray me. I was wrong. It was a Thursday evening when everything changed. Emily had texted me earlier, saying she had to stay late at the gallery for an event. I didn't think much of it. She often had openings or client meetings. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact that morning, or how she rushed out the door without her usual goodbye kiss. I decided to surprise her. I picked up her favorite Thai food and drove to the gallery. The lights were on, but the front door was locked. I knocked, but no one answered. That's when I noticed a shadow moving in the back room. I walked around the building and peered through the window. What I saw shattered me. Emily was there, but she wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize had his arms around her. They were laughing, whispering, and then they kissed. Not a friendly peck, but a deep, passionate kiss that made my stomach churn. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands trembled, and the bag of food slipped from my grip, spilling containers onto the pavement. I wanted to burst in, to scream, to demand answers. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, watching the woman I loved betray me in the most intimate way. When I finally found the strength to leave, I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind racing. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And why? Why would she do this to us? I didn't go home that night. I stayed at a cheap motel, replaying the scene in my head over and over. By morning, I had a plan. I needed answers, but I also needed to keep my cool. If I confronted her too aggressively, she might lie or leave before I could understand what had happened. When I walked into the house the next day, Emily was in the kitchen, sipping coffee. She looked up surprised. "Dan, where were you last night? I tried calling you." I forced a smile. "Sorry, I had a late meeting. Lost track of time." She frowned. "You could have texted. I was worried." The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Worried, really. I sat down at the table, my heart pounding. "Emily, we need to talk." Her expression shifted. She knew something was wrong. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "I came by the gallery last night. I saw you. With him." Her face went pale. "Dan, Who is he?" I interrupted, my voice steady but cold. She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "His name is Marcus. He's an artist. We've been seeing each other for a few months." Hearing her admit it out loud was like a knife to the chest. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" She shook her head, crying now. "I don't know. I love you, Dan. I do. But things have been so routine. I felt like we were drifting apart. Marcus made me feel alive again. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that she'd destroyed everything. But instead, I just nodded. "I need some time to think," I said quietly. Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there sobbing. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind was consumed with thoughts of Emily and Marcus. I needed to do something, but I didn't know what. Revenge? Divorce? Both? I wanted her to feel the pain I was feeling, but I also didn't want to lose myself in the process. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I hired a private investigator to look into Marcus. What I found was enlightening. Marcus wasn't just an artist. He was a con man. He'd been involved in several scams, including defrauding wealthy women out of their money. He was charming, manipulative, and dangerous. I realized then that Emily wasn't just a willing participant in this affair, she was a victim. Marcus had preyed on her vulnerability, her dissatisfaction with our marriage. He'd used her, and now he was probably planning to do the same to someone else. I couldn't let that happen. I confronted Emily again, this time with the evidence. I showed her everything the investigator had found, Marcus's criminal record, his history of scams, even photos of him with other women. At first, she refused to believe it, but as she read through the documents, the truth sank in. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I swear, Dan, I didn't know." I believed her, and in that moment I realized that my anger wasn't just at her, it was at Marcus. He was the one who had manipulated her, who had torn apart our marriage. He needed to pay. Together, Emily and I came up with a plan. We would expose Marcus for who he really was. We reached out to some of his previous victims and gathered enough evidence to take him down. It wasn't easy, and it took months, but eventually we succeeded. Marcus was arrested, and his crimes were exposed in the media. In the end, Emily and I didn't stay together. The trust between us was broken, and we both knew it couldn't be repaired. But we parted on good terms, with a mutual respect for what we'd been through. She moved to New York to start over, and I stayed in Chicago, focusing on my career and rebuilding my life. As for Marcus, he got what he deserved. But more importantly, I got something too, closure. I didn't let my anger consume me. Instead, I channeled it into something productive, something that helped others. And in doing so, I found a sense of peace. Life isn't perfect. It's messy and complicated and sometimes downright painful, but it's also full of second chances. And as I sit here now, watching the sunset over the city, I can't help but feel hopeful for what's to come. Because sometimes the best revenge is living well,